Right? Yeah. This is scary interesting. Scary interesting. We normally do the like expedition, the Franklin expedition, and all them that's gone wrong. He does the cave exploring ones, yeah. But this one is quick one. Again, another Reddit thing. I think Rory Reacts has got to get a Reddit because all of these stories and that seem to come from Reddit. Or like Reddit does seem to be the place to be for spooky stuff. But yeah, scary stories from Reddit, Stalker Pete. I mean, with a name like that, you got to do a bit of stalking. But yeah, let's go.
An 18-year-old girl was stalked by a 60-year-old man named Pete at her job at the local grocery store. It started off fairly innocently, I mean, as innocent as stalking can get, but soon took a horrifying turn. At the grocery store she worked the small counter that would sell cigarettes, lottery tickets, and other small checkouts, and the man would come in every single shift she worked. No exaggeration, he didn't miss a single shift, and he'd always come to her checkout. Even if she was working a different checkout that day, he wouldn't go to her usual checkout. He would come to the one that she was working. He would also stare at her in a really creepy way, you know, the type of stare that lasts way too long and they don't look away if you stare back. And even if she completely ignored him, she could still feel that he was staring at her, no matter how far away she was in the store. He then started to buy her chocolate every time he came to her register, and in the beginning she would accept because she didn't really know how to politely decline, and it got to the point where she just had bags and bags of Reese's behind the counter. One time, he even brought her a cake that he had baked himself and gave it to her in front of the entire store at the checkout. So, if you can picture a 60-year-old man giving an 18-year-old girl a cake in front of an entire grocery store, that's the level of creepy and awkward that she was dealing with. He also
So far, all I'm hearing is he's old and, do you know what I mean, still thinks he's got it. Still thinks he's a bit of a lad. I bet he's thinking, she's like putty in my hand. It's like, bro, you ain't, do you know what I mean? Don't look like you did when you was 20.
come in with a friend of his on a regular basis, who luckily enough just happened to live 2 doors down from her, and she knew this because he had a very specific work truck that she recognized. His friend would occasionally stare at her when they both happened to be outside their house, and one day, on her day off, she went into the store to get some snacks, and Pete was there with his friend. She went to lane 1, and Pete was in another lane farther back in the store, and as she checked out, he stared at her with a borderline evil look on his face. This time in particular was so creepy, it gave her chills. From that point onward, things began to escalate, and other employees at the store began to notice his weird fixation with her. So they started sending her to the back room whenever he came in so that she wouldn't have to see him. And during this whole thing, she'd been telling her parents about what was happening with Pete, and finally, her dad decided to get involved. They lived about a block away from the store, so her dad told her to message him as soon as Pete came in, and he would drive down right away. She gave her dad a description of Pete so he knew who to look for when he came in, and thankfully, Pete always came in wearing the exact same thing: a work shirt, gray ponytail, and blue bandana, so he'd be easy to identify. One day, Pete comes in, her dad shows up, and stands right behind Pete in line as he checked out. And that day, he got to witness firsthand the absolute creep Pete was towards her. In fact, that day, he finally went to the extent of asking her out on a date. She declined, and Pete actually pushed back, but she continued to decline, and eventually he left the store with her dad in hot pursuit. After that, she never saw Pete again. Her dad wouldn't tell her exactly what he said to him, other than that he was really shaken up by what he said. Fast forward to one night, she was working at around 9:30 p.m., finishing up her shift because the store closed at 10, and in walks Pete's friend. He walks in and heads around the counter towards the back of the store to do some shopping, presumably, and she happens to notice through the window that he parked his work truck right next to her car. This was particularly odd because she had parked fairly far away. Early in the day when she got there, the store was busy, and so all the spots at the front were taken. Now though, the store was dead, and the parking lot was empty, and he still parked right beside her car at the back of the parking lot. Feeling really creeped out now, she tells her supervisor about it, and her supervisor was like, "Yeah, that's super creepy. Let me walk you to your car at the end of your shift." Apparently, they were talking kind of loud because not even 5 seconds later, Pete's friend comes from around the corner and walks right out of the store. He didn't buy a single thing even though he'd been in the store for like 15 minutes. She instantly felt this pit in her stomach at the thought that they might have planned to kidnap her, or at the very least confront her late at night when no one else was around. From that point on, thankfully, she never saw either of them again and stopped working there shortly after for somewhere better. And this whole experience was so creepy and disturbing that she is still insanely conscious of her surroundings to this day.
Yeah, as a dad as well. Do you know what I mean? You would have to be like, I swear to you now, if she says one more thing about you, you're a dead man. What's it? I still think one of the most gangster lines in Godfather is when they have the meeting when Michael's in Italy in the first one. And he says, I've lost my son, you've lost your son. And they all agree. And he's like, I'm going to, he said, I can forgive my son, that you killed my son, but I have another son who's hiding in Italy, who I want to bring back. And if anything happens to him, what's he say? If he trips when he's walking down the street, if he gets hit by a truck, if he chokes, like, he's like, I'm going to hold some of the people in this room accountable, and that I will not forgive. Like, that's some cold-blooded gangster shit. You touch him, yeah. What's it? The Indian says in Outlaw Josie Wells, when him, his Indian mate, and that family get kidnapped, and then he's up on the thing, and the girl's like, "Who's that?" And the Indian says, "Was it hell? Hell is coming for breakfast." Yeah, yeah, but yeah, no, that's creepy, and that's the thing as well with being a girl, is that you are at a physical disadvantage even to a weak man. You really are. And I remember saying it to this girl I was seeing for a bit. She told me she walked home. Now, she lived quite out in the middle of nowhere. And I remember saying, like, she just said to me, oh, she got off the train. It was like the last train back. So probably, what, 11:30, around that time. And then literally, to get to her house was pitch black. And just basically, like, country road, basically. Like, not that, and there's no one around. Like, she's like, yeah, I'm just walking down with my headphones on. And I was like, what? I went mad. And she was like, yeah, but I'll be all right. Like, even if someone does come, I was like, no, you won't. Like, you won't be. You think you'll be, because the world, the modern world, has somehow convinced women that, yeah, they can physically challenge a man. But until that actually happens and you realize you can't, when you realize you're fighting a man now actually isn't trying to not hurt you, do you know what I mean? And she kind of just blew me off and was like, oh, you're just an idiot. But then she said, like, a couple of weeks later, she was sitting in her car and some man just came up and he was like, he was towering over me and he was talking in the window. And she's like, and I did, she's like, what you said went through my head. She's like, I just thought, if he was to do something now, like, I would actually have no chance of doing anything. Like, I'm completely vulnerable. She's like, and I was thinking, how have you never thought about that? She was older than me as well. Like, how have you never thought about that? Yeah. But like I say, this isn't the worst thing that can happen to someone to make them wary of their surroundings. Girls are far too comfortable walking around on their own at night and that. Like, I see them when I'm walking Nala and I just think, you are nuts. Do you know what I mean? It's different for me. Like I say, I'm big. Do you know what I mean? I'm normally wearing a hood and I'm on Nala. Right? People. even without Nala, people, no one really would stop and bother me. No one. I could walk through a big crowd of boys. None of them's gonna say anything. But with Nala, yeah. Do you know what I mean? And she's mental anyway. Do you know what I mean? She's trying to jump up everyone she sees because she thinks everyone's her best mate. But yeah, anyway, that's the reaction. Sweet.